Speakers for the first session on the stage. Mr. Amit Bhatt, Managing Director, ICCT India. Ms. Revati Pradeep, Researcher, ICCT India. Mr. Sudhendu Sinha from NITI Aayog. And Mr. Amitabh Kant. A very welcome to all of you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to this one-day workshop on low emission zones. The workshop is organized by the International Council on Clean Transport and NITI Aayog, and is supported by Ragri Foundation and Sustainable Mobility Network. Today, we are going to discuss on the need as well as how does one go about doing low emission zones? So basically, as you know, that ever since Mr. Kant took over as the CEO of NITI Aayog, during his tenure, there was a massive push towards cleaner modes of transport in India, be it electric mobility or hydrogen. The idea was to push for zero emission vehicles in India. And we started seeing results on ground, with cities like Delhi now reaching close to 20% of all the sales of new vehicles as electric. The reason why we are doing this workshop is how do we accelerate the transition to cleaner modes of transport? Now, a recent research by ICCT has found that if India has to meet its net zero target of 2070 target of net zero, we have to electrify all modes of transport somewhere between 2045 to 2050. Now, as we embark on this journey, the question is, how do we accelerate this pace of electrification? We already have interesting policies being pushed both at national and state level, be it financial incentives like FAME, state EV policies. We are seeing a lot of push on the infrastructure creation. We are seeing a lot of campaigns around why people should go electric. But we have realized that to accelerate this pace of transition, we need more. And one way which we are seeing that cities are accelerating this pace is by creating zero or low emission zones. So today, in this workshop, we will discuss 4 broad themes of LEZ. One, the first technical session will look at how LEZs have come up in other parts of the world. What's the learning from those experiments and experiences? Second, how do we start a LEZ in India? Looking at regulatory framework, but also some kind of policy and fiscal support. Post-lunch, we have a session on technology. How can technology aid in low emission zones? And then the last session is an interesting session on what would be the first movers in the LEZ conversation in India. Where do we start? So we have an agenda packed day today, but again, welcome again to Mr. Sudhendu Sinha from NITI Aayog, who's been supporting us actively on this work, and definitely Mr. Amitabh Kant, the G20 Sherpa for India, who has been spearheading this campaign both at national and international level. So with this, I would like to invite Mr. Sinha to deliver his special address.
Good morning to all of you. Thank you, Amit, for inviting me on this occasion. Respected G20 Sherpa, Mr. Amitabh Kant, other member on the dais, all the distinguished audience. Yes, you rightly said that electric mobility push in India has been given by none other than Mr. Amitabh Kant. So just to give you some sense that, what exactly he has been able to bring about is, that when he had taken over NITI, that time, if you see the buses, there were only 4 electric buses in India. And today there are close to 8,000 of them in public transport stream, and there are other in the private stream also. So the score goes from 4 to 8,000. That is what his impact has been. And if you see the number of electric vehicles, then that time when he was taking over, close to 16,000 electric vehicles were there. And when I say 16,000, that combines everything, all types of electric vehicles today, and combined together. And today, there are well over 36 lakh electric vehicles in India. So you can, if you see, the all X's, the multiples are in 70, 80 times. That is what the increase has been. That is what his contribution is there. Now, low emission zone, yes, let me take you 2 budgets earlier. So the budget year 2022 talks about clean and sustainable transport. And in the finance minister's speech, there is a clear mention that India will be driving clean and sustainable transportation through decarbonizing public transport. They also talk about that how this would be complemented by their 4 or 5 additional initiatives, such as governance is there, such as new technological innovations are there, electric vehicle policy is there, electric vehicles are there. And the 5th one mentions about spatial mobility zones. So this is precisely the low emission zone. So if you see the international experience, the first low emission zone was probably created in Sweden. So that time when they were going gung-ho on electric mobility, but they could realize that complete transformation can wait, but they should be creating small nodes which can serve as lighthouses, which can be islands of excellence. And that is how the LEZ, low emission zone concept, emerged. So that was in 2007, followed by, of course, Oslo, then followed it. And in UK, London did a major experiment in 2008, and they laid out a clear set of regulations that which vehicles will be there, which vehicles cannot be there. Of course, the first attack was on heavy-duty vehicles. So access of heavy-duty vehicles to London was just barred, 2008. And this experiment was so successful that by 2019, 11 years after that, they created what they call LEZs. So that is ultra low emission zone. And then they expanded it completely, and they laid out that which vehicle will be accessing the central London especially, and which are all not. And then in turn, Milan followed it, Berlin again, the same experiment was taken forward, Beijing it was taken forward. That is how it is being taken forward. So yes, the conversation that will be going throughout the day would be, of course, discussing that which area can be identified, what could be the challenges, and just talking that we can create it. So it's not like that. It's a major challenges are there. First resistance that you are going to face is that from the public resistance is the first one that you are going to face. Because then anybody going to say that if you have created, let's say, 2-kilometer radius around a school, around a college, around a municipal building, around a hospital, or whichever public space that you have decided as a low emission zone, the first challenge is they would say that why it is that you have created it and we are not having access. So it becomes equally challenging for the equity point also. So that has to be handled with a lot of awareness initiatives, then only it runs through. In addition to that, it challenges businesses. Businesses that are in that low emission periphery, and businesses which are outside that low emission. So suppose a fleet is there which has got a poorer standard of vehicle, and you are making them, you are imposing a restriction that you can't have access to, let's say, All India Institute of Medical Sciences area around. So that is a restriction. That is, you are challenging the businesses. So that needs to be also handled through regulations, through a lot of technological innovations, through a lot of awareness initiatives. So a lot of, I would say that a set of challenges are there in governance, also challenges are there. Political will is required. So a set of challenges are there that needs to be handled properly, then only you go in for this creation of LEZs and ULEZs. So this is what the thought starter could be for the entire team that would be deliberating throughout the day. And let me compliment ICCT, all their partners, and each one of you for being here. I would say that this is a very, very significant area that we are attempting to create a well geographically demarcated area in urban space where the access to vehicles are regulated for the purpose that the pollution level, be it noise, the air quality, all those things are improved upon. So that is what the challenge is. So best wishes to the entire team that would be deliberating for the day. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Sinha. And again, the deliberations would be shared with NITI, and we can then chalk out a strategy on how do you kind of take this conversation forward and have some meaningful engagements going on at city level. Now I will request Honorable Shri Amitabh Kant ji, the G20 Sherpa for India, to deliver his keynote address. Over to you, Mr. Kant.
Mr. Sinha, Mr. Amit, Bhatt, all the distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted that this initiative is being taken by the, this conduct of this ICCT and NITI Aayog workshop on low emission zones. I've been a long-term believer that this low emission zones in cities are very critical because they have a huge demonstration impact. And I'm also happy that this initiative, which was started during my tenure at NITI Aayog, is being continued. And also that ICCT and NITI Aayog are collaborating together and taking this forward. This is probably one of the biggest transport decarbonization initiatives in India, with over 50 plus deliverables, and many, many stakeholders, including ICCT, NITI Aayog, MAUA, MOTH, Agora, REN21, ITF, many more. And one of the reasons why I came today morning is because I support an initiative, because it is a very diverse one. One of the biggest problems with India's transportation sector is the multiplicity of agencies involved, and rarely do I find that these agencies which are involved, rarely do they speak to each other. Just take the example of Delhi itself and just try and map out all the transport agencies involved. You have the public transport buses being run by DTC. You have the Namo Bharat train, which would soon be coming here, which will be brought by NCRTC. You have the orange cluster buses being run by DIMTS. You have metro being run by DMRC. You have some roads maintained by PWD, some by MCD, some by PWD, some by NDMC. And traffic signals are managed by Delhi police. None of them speak to each other. And in London, for the purposes of comparison, it is all maintained by one agency, and that is the Transport for London. So a lot of problems can get solved when you get all stakeholders together at the table, and that was the intent behind NDCTIA, to start a dialogue and drive very meaningful action at the national level. And this is, I just gave you the example of Delhi, but a similar problem exists with all major cities, including Mumbai, Calcutta, etc. And if we want low emission zones, firstly, we need to understand the magnitude of the problem that we are trying to solve here. Globally, about 60 to 70% emissions are attributable to cities. And this number is no different in India. In fact, in India, it's even greater and much worse. And therefore, it's very, very important that we are able to crack the cities. In India, the transport sector contributes anywhere between 16 to 25% of our total emissions. So almost a quarter of India's carbon footprint actually comes from the transport sector. And the problem is even more pronounced in cities, because in a developing country like India, cities are undergoing very remarkable transformation and development. And in the process, everything from vehicle volumes, traffic congestion, construction is all increasing at a very, very unprecedented pace. Many of you who've grown up in Delhi would have seen this. Delhi will double its urban population by 2050, and it'll end up becoming the most populous city in the world by 2040. It'll be the most populous city in the world by 2040. So we really need to start solving for emissions. And of course, within transport, the future lies in electric vehicles, shared mobility, public transport, and most importantly, according to me, also making Delhi more walkable and bikeable. When I was studying here in Delhi in school, I used to cycle around, go to my school, which is almost about 15 kilometers away, and cycle. And today, nobody cycles in Delhi. And in India today, we need to envision a concentric model of transport. People should be able to walk to bus stops. Bus routes should feed into metro. Metro should feed into regional rails. Regional rails should feed into airports and national railways. And this is the key towards solving for not only emissions, but also congestion. I think we would also remember that when the eastern and western peripheral expressways were built in Delhi, heavy vehicles, which are also the biggest polluters, ended up bypassing Delhi. This led to a major reduction in emissions. Now we need to do this within cities in India. Perhaps starting with Delhi, we need to identify which are the pollution hotspots in Delhi, and we need to find ways for vehicles to bypass these zones. And the similar approach needs to be taken for all other cities. And you have a number of ways to create low emission zones. Everything from ensuring that these zones only allow electric vehicles to enter, to imposing an additional fare on combustion vehicles entering these zones. You also need to look at more innovative methods such as timings of entry of combustion vehicles. Normally we allow heavy vehicles into the city late at night in winters. Nights are colder, so all of your pollution actually settles down and ends up choking the city. But during the day, heavy vehicles would add to congestion, so somehow you need to arrive at a middle path. I am sure that if we use technology, we can play an important role in optimizing this. But what is most important is that we cannot just start taxing vehicles and stopping entry of combustion vehicles into low emission zones. As planners, we need to think about what you're offering them instead. And so much low emission zones, to my mind, low emission zones must always be accompanied by creating excellent walking and biking infrastructure. They should be accompanied by deploying EV charging infrastructure. They should be accompanied by making roads safer for pedestrians by installing pedestrian crossing signals and giving greater visibility into the schedule of public transportation buses. Only if this happens, then you will be able to control combustion vehicles. And therefore, I have 5 recommendations for you. The first is that technology has a huge role to play here. Today, people have no idea when the next public transport bus or the next metro rail would come. And only 5 cities of India show this on a dynamic, real-time basis. If I am a commuter, I do not know when my next bus or train would come, and I would end up taking my personal vehicle instead. And therefore, it's very important that on a dynamic, real-time basis, we should be able to get information about the bus and train. Secondly, we also need to work to ensure that all buses and metros follow the GTFS data standard so that commuters using any form of navigation app can see their real time of arrival. And this is critical. Second, please leverage technology to predict pollution hotspots. Today you have technology available that allows satellite imagery, temperature, wind direction, and hyperlocal air pollution sensors to predict which are the pollution hotspots in the city, that is the cause, and how do these vary over the day, over the week, over the year, and so on. And this is where artificial intelligence and machine learning are defining frontiers with every passing day. We must be able to use the best technology. And if you look at a city like Barcelona, which is using cameras that deploy neural networks to detect violators in low emission zones, you have technological companies who are actually implementing solutions such as optimization of traffic signals and prediction of hyperlocal air quality right from Israel to Hyderabad, a city in India, and therefore we can easily do this in other cities. And thirdly, to my mind, the future lies in digital twins of cities. Every aspect of a city, including where low emission zones must be created, can be today simulated on digital twins. This is the future. I am a big believer in the combined power of different types of technologies. Many countries of the world have been able to model their congestion and emission patterns using digital twins because they are using a fusion of satellite, ground and aerial imagery, and this they blend this with artificial intelligence and machine learning. You look at a company like Cyrodiil, which is a French company, is harnessing digital twins to help simulate climate action, complete scenarios of climate action. And I would urge you to look up how the Council of Warrington in UK is leveraging digital twins to actually solve for emissions in their cities. All these is possible today. And therefore, fourth and very critical, how do we define low emission zones? What is low emission? Do you know that when pollution checks of cars are done, they only test for PM 2.5 and PM10 and not nitrogen oxides and sulfur oxides. And therefore, so you may have a low PM 2.5 level, but you may be actually inhaling more toxic air. And therefore, ICCT, NITI Aayog, and many others must work with MOD to see how this needs to be modified so that we are able to work out a clear definition of low emission zones. And fifthly, we must encourage vertical development. This is critical. Urban sprawl is one of the main reasons why people use personal vehicles to commute. Look at all cities across Asia, Singapore to Japan to many other places are all examples where we encourage people to go vertical. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I am really of the belief that low emission zones today are critical. We are behind the curve, we are behind the journey, and we must strive to catch up. If China, UK, Finland, Indonesia, Italy, Denmark, Japan, Portugal can catch, all have low emission zones, why are we so far behind? It is actually a shame for India. The problem is not the dearth of ideas, the problem is one of will, administrative will. We as policymakers need to sit down and address the issue of emissions, and nothing to my mind is impossible. Would anyone have thought that Delhi would have a Namo Bharat train that would connect Meerut with Delhi and Delhi to Alwar? That someone would be able to board a train running every 3 minutes to Meerut and after an hour walk into Indira Gandhi International Terminal without changing anywhere? But with administrative and political will, we've defied all odds. It is now a reality in India. We've been able to do this. And therefore, I would encourage you to think a step further. Let us aim not to create only low emission zones, but actually net zero emission zones. Today, technology has progressed at a phenomenal pace, really rapid pace. The biggest challenge with the low emission zones is that air pollution is an airshed issue, which means that designing a zone as low emission zone does not mean you have created visible barriers that would stop emissions from the rest of the city from creeping in. And this is impossible. And this is where we need a more holistic perspective, a more holistic lens, which also involves introduction of cutting-edge technology. For example, let us say that New Delhi were to become a low-emission zone. There are no polluting vehicles in the zone. Would it stop pollution from outside these invisible boundaries from creeping in? No, it will not. And therefore, but what you can do is to model emissions such that when there are carbon sources, we plan carbon sinks, everything from direct air capture of carbon to planning canopies of trees offset carbon. And therefore, this must also become part of the solution. And you can actually only model these sources and sinks by leveraging cutting-edge technologies, which is very feasible today. And that is why I've always maintained that technology would play a critical role, whether it's artificial intelligence, machine learning, drones, satellite imagery, digital twins, hyperlocal sensors, and real-time transit data. All this needs to come together to help create cities of the future. And let us start with where we are, exactly where we are sitting, in Delhi, and expand to every single smart city of India. If you can crack it in Delhi, you can then take it to other areas of India and actually help in greenfield cities. Greenfield cities are not yet planned, which means that we can actually plan them to be low or no emissions right from the start, in the beginning. And therefore, my view is that today's deliberations are very critical, they're very significant, they're very important, and that is why I came here, because my belief always has been that we need cutting-edge technology to be utilized for this purpose. And I would be very happy to look forward to your recommendations, and my doors are always open, and I would be very happy to brainstorm with all of you on how best to use technology to make Delhi a unique model city, and that which can then have demonstration impact on all the other major cities of India. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Kant. Very insightful point that you raised, and I think 5 points that you mentioned that we have to look at as part of low emission zone is something very critical, and we are definitely keeping note of that. 2 important points that came out. One was, how do you use technology? Second, how do we use data so that our decision making is better? And an important aspect that we raised was, are we really modeling the right emission that is coming out from transport vehicle? I think what you mentioned, the PUC test was very insightful point. And sir, as part of the work that we are doing with support from Center for Science and Environment and Ragiri Foundation, we are just concluding a study where we have captured about 110,000 vehicles in and around Delhi and got the data on what is it that comes out in the real world scenario. So not in the PUC, but when these vehicles move, what comes out. We have captured NOx emissions, we have captured carbon emissions, we have captured CO and hydrocarbon emissions. And that is something that we want to discuss with you later on. We'd like to have a brainstorming with you, sir, to understand how do we take this conversation forward in terms of real world versus lab value and how cities can be created better. So with this, again, thanks a lot to Mr. Sinha and Mr. Kant, sir, for joining this opening plenary session. We would then close this session. We will start our technical session in 20 minutes. But before we do, again, a round of applause to both Mr. Sinha and Mr. Kant. They really set the context for next 4 technical sessions to follow. And I would request all of you to please come forward for a group photograph. We will then break for tea and reassemble at 11 to start the first technical session.